Welcome to the Reinvention Code. I'm your host, Dorinda Walker. Reinvention isn't random, it has a code. On this podcast, we'll explore what it really takes to navigate life's transitions with introspection, faith, and strategy. If you're evolving, rebuilding, or stepping into a new season, you're not just starting over, you're leveling up. Let's decode your next chapter together. Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of the Reinvention Code. This episode is going to look and sound a little different, and I want to tell you why. 3 times. That is how many times my sister friend LaToyia, Dennis, and I tried to record this conversation. During our first 2 attempts, the sound repeatedly cut out. Often when she began talking about God, her faith, and what he has been teaching her during one of her hardest seasons. We were determined to get this conversation recorded, so we tried a 3rd time. This time, half the video went black, and the final 15 minutes of the conversation became completely unavailable. What makes this especially difficult to dismiss is that I have recorded other guests using the same platform, the equipment, the process, without any of these problems. It only happened with LaToyia. Now, I understand that technology fails. Files can be corrupted. Internet connections drop. Not every inconvenience is spiritual warfare. But when the same disruption happens 3 times with the same person during the same kind of conversation, while every other interview records without issue, I pay attention. I cannot prove what caused it, but I can tell you what it felt like, right? It felt like resistance. And the Bible tells us that spiritual resistance is real. Ephesians 6 says that our struggle is not merely against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces we cannot always see. It tells us to put on the full armor of God, that we can stand against the enemy's schemes. I think the word schemes matters because a scheme is rarely obvious. It can be strategic. It can be subtle. It can show up as confusion, disruption, discouragement, exhaustion, or the persistent suggestion that what God gave you is no longer worth fighting for. 1 Peter tells us to be alert and sober-minded because the enemy is looking for someone to devour. I love that the Bible gives us both instructions together: be alert, but remain sober-minded, to pay attention, but do not become consumed by fear, exercise spiritual discernment without assuming that every inconvenience is an attack. And that's the balance I'm trying to hold here in this episode. I cannot say with certainty that the enemy caused our technical problems, but I can recognize the pattern. 3 separate recordings, sound disappearing during conversations about God, video turning black, 15 minutes of a powerful conversation becoming completely unavailable. And all of this happened while LaToyia was walking through one of the most difficult seasons of her life. Jesus tells us in John chapter 10, verse 10, that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But Christ came so that we could have life in its fullness. Sometimes what is being stolen is not a physical possession. Sometimes it's your peace, your confidence, clarity, energy, or willingness to keep going. If the enemy cannot destroy the assignment, he may try to exhaust the person carrying it. Think about how many things we've walked away from, not because God told us to stop, but because the resistance made us tired. How many assignments have we questioned because the process became harder than we expected? How many times have we interpreted difficulty as a sign that we were on the wrong path, when it may have been confirmation that what we were carrying mattered? That is why discernment is so important. Sometimes resistance is God redirecting us. Sometimes it is life requiring us to adjust. And sometimes it is the enemy trying to frustrate, isolate, and discourage us long enough for us to abandon the assignment ourselves. But Scripture does not tell us to panic. It tells us to stand. James chapter 4, verse 7 tells us to submit ourselves to God. Resist the devil and he will flee. Resistance is not passive. It means we pray when we feel discouraged. We speak truth when fear starts lying to us. We stay connected when isolation feels easier. We rest when exhaustion makes us vulnerable. We seek wise counsel, take practical action, and refuse to make permanent decisions from a temporary place of despair. And sometimes resistant means I'm going to press record for the fourth time, even if the fourth recording looks completely different from the first three. Ephesians 6 says that after we have done everything, we are still called to stand, not because we understand everything that is happening, but because we know who stands with us. So today I'm standing. LaToyia is standing, and this message is still going forward. The enemy does not get to decide that a technical failure means the assignment is over. After the third attempt, I had a choice. I could scrap the entire episode and allow everything LaToyia shared to disappear, or I could change the format and refuse to let the disruption silence the message. So today you're going to hear the portions of our conversation that I was able to preserve. I'm also going to step in along the way to talk about what it means when the resistant feels spiritual and how we keep moving when everything seems designed to make us question the assignment, and to understand why I was not willing to let this conversation disappear. You have to understand how LaToyia and I became friends. Our relationship began with a cold call. What happened next revealed LaToyia's heart and created a bond between us that has lasted for years. She came to that call looking for a sponsor, but God had given her a different assignment. Our friendship began with her praying for a man she had never met. I want you to hear LaToyia tell that story in her own words. And I'm so excited to bring you a guest I don't just admire, but deeply, deeply respect because of how she provides service to others. We're bonded because we both live purposeful lives. And, I'm just so excited to have her on. I love chatting with her every day. So I'm hoping that you guys love to chat with her. So without further ado, let me bring you and introduce you to LaToyia Dennis, better known as the Motivated Mom. Welcome, LaToyia.
Hey, beautiful people. Hey, Dee. Thank you so much for having me, boo.
So why don't you tell the story of how you met me, and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, so for years I've been in fundraising and fund development and sponsorship, and I was cold calling, working for a big major ministry, and I cold called Dorinda in hopes that she would support the event. And for some reason, y'all, she didn't put me, I called her work number. She didn't put me on hold, and she got a phone call on her cell phone. And the call was from, I guess, a Dr. D.
It was from the hospital saying that my husband had a heart attack.
Her husband had a heart attack. And so I'm hearing the whole conversation, y'all. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I can't ask her, for anything. I have to pray. So when she came back to the phone, she said, listen, I got to go. I said, but before you go, let me pray for you and your husband. And I meant it. And I prayed for Thomas for months before I asked her for, as a matter of fact, I never even asked. My assignment was to check on her, make sure Thomas was good. And I did that for about 3 months. And then finally one day I called and she said, what do you want? Because whatever you want, I'm going to give it to you because you have been praying for me and my husband. And I was like, all right, well, I'm thankful for that. But it really was an assignment to pray for you and Thomas.
Yeah. And what I remember is you called me every day. D, how's Thomas doing? You didn't even know my husband at that time.
I didn't even know you.
I know. And then lo and behold, I ended up sponsoring the event, and we've been connected ever since. And it's just a testament that you never know who God is going to bring to your life and for what reason. And she's been one of those people who've been just part of my sister group, someone who I can depend on, who I can pray with, who I can just be myself with without worrying about ulterior motives or jealousy or any of that kind of stuff. And so I love you for that.
I love you too, Dee. I love you. And I miss Thomas. I love Thomas too. I still rehearse you and Thomas back and forth just some experiences that I've gotten to experience with you all in your marriage, and just funny stories. And I'm so very grateful that I came in on the side of being able to get to know Thomas, that I met you when he was still here, because he's my brother and y'all, but he would fight anybody for me. So it was definitely a kindred spirit, but I'm so very grateful that I had the opportunity to experience you both and together, because y'all are hilarious.
Thank you. We were hilarious. And I wasn't trying to be y'all, but it just is what it is.
I'm not gonna go there, y'all, because I can reiterate some stuff, but we're not gonna do it today. I know D. Marshall would be rolling if I started to go into that whole. Yeah, y'all, we've been through some stuff together. I love you too, D.
That is who LaToyia is. She did not know Thomas. She had never met my husband, and she had no idea whether I would sponsor that event. But she felt led to pray, and she continued checking on us without asking for anything in return. That experience taught me something about spiritual assignments. They do not always arrive with a title, a platform, or a plan. Sometimes they begin with a simple prompting to serve someone when there is nothing in it for you. That same spirit of service became the foundation of LaToyia's work. Many people know her as the motivated mom, but the platform began with her desire to become the woman she knew she was called to be and the kind of mother her children deserved. What started as a personal commitment to live with purpose eventually became a way to inspire and equip other mothers to do the same. But motherhood also gave LaToyia an assignment she never expected. After experiencing 5 miscarriages and later surviving a maternal health crisis, she did not fully understand until 14 years later. She came to view her survival as more than a blessing. She saw it as a command from God to use her lived experience to advocate for other women, particularly Black women, whose symptoms and concerns are too often dismissed. I asked LaToyia how the Motivated Mom began and how her personal journey led her into maternal health advocacy. Check it out. So you're a speaker, an author, a parent enthusiast, a maternal health advocate, and so many of people who follow you know you as the Motivated Mom. So how did Motivated Mom start, and what's your passion behind it?
Motivated Mom it really started funny because I didn't even know what blogging was. I had no clue, but I was working for a major ministry, and the pastor was invited to the Disney Dreamer Academy. And while there, one of the Disney associates said, you know what? We have a social media, a blogger conference. You should be a blogger, a mom blogger. And I was like, really? So I left there wanting to join that. I wanted to be a part of the Disney social media moms and launched the Motivated Mom platform. I reached out to a couple of sponsors, you being one of them, Coca-Cola. You all came on board and partnered with me just out of the gate. I hired a blog coach to teach me how to create a blog. So Motivated Mom came about because I was creating what I needed and what I know I needed to provide for my children. I was wanting to be the motivated mom and inspire other moms to do the same.
That's awesome. And then now you're so passionate about maternal health. So tell us about your maternal health journey and why you started becoming an advocate.
What's interesting, Dorinda, is my maternal health journey was a surprise to me. Now, I knew that I experienced 5 miscarriages, and the 5th one nearly killed me. When we went to the doctor, my doctor kept saying, oh, Black women have miscarriages all the time. Try again. And in the moment, hindsight, thinking back, I should have said, well, why is that? As opposed to just accepting it. Ended up being part of the Moms Tour. Maternal Outcomes Matter. And my story, I was lived experience for the tour, but ended up leading the tour holistically. But my maternal experience and journey at that point was just, I miscarried 5 times. And when I went to my new doctor, she did a test on my body and determined, LaToyia, you have been miscarrying because your body lacked progesterone and the baby needed the progesterone to live. So she said, when you get pregnant, are you tired? I said, nope, not. She said, yeah, because you lack progesterone and the baby needs it to live. Long story short, we got the progesterone. About 3 or 4 months in, I started having miscarriage symptoms again. The hospital said, oh, you miscarried again. Go get the DNC. We go to the hospital. Andre is in the room with me, not in the waiting room. She said, well, LaToyia, listen, this will be the sixth, this is your sixth DNC. Let's just walk across the street, do the DNC. And Andre said, can we not do it? Because this will be the sixth one. What is it doing to her? They did a sonogram. The hospital had made a mistake. There my baby was kicking and moving. So I'm on bed rest. Fast forward. I have Chance. We're in the hospital several days, but 3 days after getting out, something happened to me. My body starts seizing and releasing fluid. Andre called 911. They had him check my blood pressure. He gave me a shot of apple cider vinegar and a bottle of water. I got up, started walking around, had no idea. Fast forward 14 years later, I'm doing the mom's tour, and my only experience was my 5 miscarriages and the lack of progesterone, which I needed people to know because people don't typically check progesterone levels. And so advocacy. And I'm on the panel with the Kansas City Chiefs coach and a Black OBGYN and a doula. And the Black doctor says the leading cause of death postpartum for Black women is gestational diabetes and preeclampsia. And I said, hold on, how is that the leading cause of death postpartum when those morbidities go away once you have your baby? And she said, yeah, that's what the doctors say. But culturally, for Black women, that's not the case. She said, it's kind of like COVID. If you had underlying issues, you were at a greater risk of dying. She said the same with gestational diabetes and preeclampsia. If you have those in your family, the likelihood of them going away after pregnancy is slim to none. And they are killing Black women. Your body starts seizing, releasing fluid, and you die. Deep at that moment, I broke down crying. Like I couldn't even believe it. I was overwhelmed and everybody is looking at me. But this is the first time I had heard what had happened to me when I had Chance 14 years ago. And she said, are you okay? And I said, no. I said, that happened to me. She said, what happened to you? I said, I was home 3 days from having my baby. My body starts seizing and I was releasing fluid. Our mattress, our box spring was wet. My husband then gave me a shot of apple cider vinegar and a bottle of water. And I got up and started walking around. She started crying. She said, I have never known anybody that made it. Like, God wanted you here for a purpose. And at that moment, I understood that what had happened to me was a demand and a command from God for me to advocate on behalf of those who had lost their lives and the others who were at risk too. We had to communicate cultural advocacy because so many people in our families have gestational diabetes and preeclampsia, and we treat it as if, it'll go away. It's just normal, but it's the leading cause of death postpartum for Black women. And so I became very, very serious about the maternal health advocacy from that point.
I love that you said that you realized that God needed you to share your story and to advocate for others. Because I think a lot of times we experience these things and we want to keep them to ourselves and we don't want to tell the stories for fear of judgment or, we don't want people in our business. But I think it's so important that we understand that sometimes we go through these things because it's part of our purpose. God wants us to share these stories, to advocate, to do whatever he's calling us to do to help someone else. So thank you for sharing that story. And hopefully it motivates someone else who may have experienced or be experiencing a hardship to know that by telling your story, you can help someone else. Spiritual warfare is often described as something happening around us. But sometimes the most dangerous battle is one happening within us. Pain can make us defensive. Disappointment can turn into bitterness. Unhealed trauma can affect the way we see ourselves and the people around us. If we are not careful, the enemy can use our wounds, our anger, and our pride to convince us the person standing in front of us is the enemy. LaToyia had to confront that truth while going through one of the most painful experiences of her life, the end of her marriage. Divorce can make it easy to reduce someone you once loved to everything that went wrong. But LaToyia came to understand that although their marriage had ended, her husband was not her enemy. He was still her friend, the father of her children, and someone with whom she had built a family. They could no longer be husband and wife, but they could choose not to destroy each other, to remain healthy parents, and preserve their family unit. They had to find their way back to the friendship beneath the marriage. I asked LaToyia what it took to grieve the relationship, release the bitterness, and choose family over feelings. Take a look. Spiritual warfare is often described as something happening around us. But sometimes the most dangerous battle is one happening within us. Pain can make us defensive. Disappointment can turn into bitterness. Unhealed trauma can affect the way we see ourselves and the people around us. If we are not careful, the enemy can use our wounds, our anger, and our pride to convince us the person standing in front of us is the enemy. LaToyia had to confront that truth while going through one of the most painful experiences of her life, the end of her marriage. Divorce can make it easy to reduce someone you once loved to everything that went wrong. But LaToyia came to understand that although their marriage had ended, her husband was not her enemy. He was still her friend, the father of her children, and someone with whom she had built a family. They could no longer be husband and wife, but they could choose not to destroy each other, to remain healthy parents, and preserve their family unit. They had to find their way back to the friendship beneath the marriage. I asked LaToyia what it took to grieve the relationship, release the bitterness, and choose family over feelings. Take a look. So speaking of Andre, you've recently gone through a divorce, but you two remain friends and great co-parents. So how do you do that? And, what has that experience taught you about parenting, about friendship, about relationships? And what advice would you give to parents who decide to divorce and how to try to keep that family unit together for the sake of the kids?
Yeah, it required me to grieve the marriage without destroying each other. Like we had to recognize that we weren't the enemy, right? And sometimes that's hard if you don't have a real connection to God because the enemy shows up in all of us at any given time, right? But we had to recognize that he's not the enemy. So the painful conversations, the tears, all of that, it was a process. It's like people say, it's like death, right? So I was angry and then I was sad and then I was happy and then I was happy and then I was sad, so it, I had to come to terms with one, how did I contribute to the end of my marriage, right? What did I do? I feel like my trauma and my brokenness and all the things that I went through, and even with therapy and all of that, like I contributed to it. His responsibilities and the things he chose to do, that's the things he chose to do. I can't make you do it no matter how good or bad I am. Those are your decisions. But I had to get rid of all the bitterness and be kind and compassionate, to love one another and forgive one another because that's what the word tells us to do. And so for me, forgiveness was not a one-time event. It's interesting that this is the first time I'm ever talking about this. I don't even know that y'all know I'm divorced. I don't even know that y'all know I'm divorced. I have been divorced for over a year, separated for 3, and this is the first time I'm talking about this. Partially because I had to let go of my shame. I felt shameful for being divorced. I felt like it was something wrong with me, you know? Uh, and I feel like over time, the way that we really were able to reconcile is Chance and Elijah. You know, no matter what, they deserve two healthy, whole parents, and it is non-negotiable. We don't choose holidays. It's no, 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 no. We get together on all of the major holidays. You know, he's not having to choose. They're not having to choose which parent they're going to be with and feeling bad about their decision. We won't do that to them. So that was a decision he and I came to. And for me, it was, this is what it is. Yeah, we won't do that to these babies. And that was our approach. It became a daily choice for us to choose family over feelings, right? I like that, family over feelings. That's exactly for us.
I love that because it takes a certain amount of courage, maturity, and emotional intelligence to understand that, okay, maybe our romantic relationship no longer works, but we still need to keep our friendship intact in order to be great parents. So I love that. There's one more thing I want to make clear. When we talk about spiritual warfare, we should never become so focused on what the enemy may be doing that we fail to recognize what God is doing. The enemy may create disruption, but God can use that disruption to redirect us. The enemy may try to isolate us, but God can reveal the people who are truly assigned to walk with us. The enemy may use hardship to make us question our identity, but God can use the same season to remind us who we are and why he placed us here. That doesn't mean every painful experience was sent by God, but it means no painful experience is beyond his ability to redeem. Many people talk about faith when things are going well, but the real test often comes when life does not make sense. So check out LaToyia's response when I asked her how she sees God showing up in ways that she didn't recognize at the time.
I am God's currency to ensure that people get to heaven. I am God's currency to ensure that moms are advocated for who are dealing with gestational diabetes or preeclampsia or any of the social determinants of health. I am God's currency to ensure that early education is advanced in low income communities. I am God's currency. He placed me here for a purpose.
I am God's currency. That quote from LaToyia stayed with me. Currency is something placed into circulation to create an exchange. And when LaToyia calls herself God's currency, she is saying that her life, her voice, her experiences, and even the seasons that crushed her can be used to create value in someone else's life. I'm a living example of that. And LaToyia's maternal health crisis became advocacy for other mothers. Her commitment to motherhood became a platform that equips families. Her concern about children entering school unprepared became a mission to advance early childhood education in underserved communities. Even the painful end of her marriage became an opportunity to model forgiveness, friendship, and healthy co-parenting. None of that makes the pain easy or fair. It means the pain does not get to be wasted. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 reminds us that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. It does not say all things are good. It says God can take all things, including the seasons we would never have chosen, and work through them. Sometimes we recognize his protection only after the danger has passed. Sometimes we understand the preparation only after the opportunity arrives. And sometimes we do not see what God is producing because we are still in the middle of being tested. But as LaToyia reminded us, being crushed does not mean you will not bear fruit. The resistance may be real. The attack may feel personal. The season may stretch you beyond anything you thought you could endure, but the enemy does not get the final word over a life surrendered to God. Your life still has purpose. Your voice still has value. Your assignment is still your assignment. And if God placed something in you that can help someone else survive, to heal, to grow, or to find their way back to Him, do not let resistance or fear convince you to keep it to yourself. Stop worrying about what other people think and step into your assignment. If something in this episode resonated with you, please like, comment, and share. Be sure to follow LaToyia Dennis to see what she does next. And be sure to support her nonprofit, A Chance to Learn. As always, I wish you continued joy, much peace, and many blessings. Until the next episode. Thank you for listening to the Reinvention Code. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who's stepping into their next season. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. Remember, reinvention isn't random, it has a code. I'll see you next time.